Right, so we'll move along with our agenda. So we'll move over to presentations from our conveners on the B panels. So I'd like to invite Russell Wheatland, who is our B1 Australian panel convener for Insulated Cables.
Thank you, Angela. Good morning still. If I had have heard Alex's presentation before I made mine, I would have condensed mine down. So I'll move through quite quickly some of my slides because Alex has covered it just beautifully. And Louise, I understand why I'm not part of your panel, because half the acronyms that you used, I have no idea what they meant. Okay, so I'm just a simple power electrical engineer. That's all I do. Okay, I work for AusNet, and it's my privilege to present to you the workings of the Study Committee B1 for Insulated Cables and a little bit of what the Australian panel has been up to over the last little while. We look at the end-to-end life of a cable system, right from design concept right through to moving it on, retiring it, getting rid of it. So it's quite an extensive study committee scope that we do. Now I understand why people have been looking at the screen, because this one's quite small. Okay, CIGRE started in 1921, and the cable system committees have been around since 1927, which is quite exciting when you think about it. Two technical fields that we look at are the AC and DC insulated systems. Wherever you're going to put a cable, B1 is there. We're looking at it submarine, land-based, whatever it might be, whatever voltage it is. Now that we're end-to-end, we're even down into the LV stuff that feeds houses and light bulbs. Power cable systems associated with microgrids and the integration of distribution networks. How our networks have changed over the last little while. Okay, as I said, CIGRE was started in 1921. The Insulated Cables was there at 1927. It started as Study Committee 2. Study Committee 1 was about oil and materials. Study Committee 2 was about cables. Study Committee became Study Committee 21 in 1967, and then in 2002 it became Study Committee B1, one of the 5 study committees dealing with the subsystems. Okay, the main subjects foreseen back in 1927 were utilisation limits of single and multi-core cables, determination of electric constants, and afterlaying tests. And here we are 100 years later, and these are still prominent in our thinking today. The study committee is supported by advisory groups, and the B1 has 3 of them, and actually it now has 4 of them, but that's not reflected here. The CAG, the TAG, and the SAG. CAG, Customer Advisory Group. What are the customers saying to us? Who are our stakeholders, and what do they want out of the study committee? The TAG, how do we communicate the information that we have out in a tutorial type of arrangement? And then the SAG, the steering, the Strategic Advisory Group. There's now a new one called the RAG, for Reliability Advisory Group, and that's a gathering of statistics and bringing all that together so people can really start to get an understanding of the reliability of cable systems around the world. The RAG has got a very interesting convener, and that would be me. So in the Paris session, you've seen some of these photos. These were all the award winners in the opening ceremony. The B1 study committee had its full day of general discussion meeting, chaired by the current, or then the current chairman of the study committee. And we also ran a tutorial this year, A New Era for Submarine Cables. This is the study committee, held over 2 days. we had a change in chairman, and the shorter gentleman in the middle, Marco Morelli, he is the outgoing chair. Standing next to him with the yellow tie was his predecessor as the chair. The gentleman on the left, Geir Claassen, is the incoming chair. And the gentleman next to him is the study committee secretary. And the two gentlemen on the right-hand side are the past secretaries for the study committee. It's terrific to see the interest that past people still hold with the study committee. And I find the same with the Australian panel. The Australian panel has the last five conveners still as active members within the Australian panel. The poster session, according to Alex's graph, which I'm going to grab and use later on, we were nearly the best, or the highest attended. We had 53 papers submitted, 53 papers presented at the 22 session, and each paper has to give a poster, and we ended up having 51 posters being presented because some people couldn't make the trip from our colleagues in countries that were a bit locked down. So here is a picture of the poster session, and fundamentally it is, as Alex said, the authors being able to interact directly with people asking questions about their paper. Statistics. Currently, the study committee has, 18 working groups, 5 joint working groups, so 23 total, and the Australian panel has representatives on 22 of those. This is an exciting part of Australia's involvement with Study Committee B1. The experts continue to rise. We've got now 472 people involved in the study committee work, and you can see on the graph how they continue to rise. And the distribution, I think this is important as well. We not only have manufacturers, we have utility people, we have consultants, institutes and universities. So we've got a wide spectrum of people that are selling equipment, developing equipment, and people that are using equipment. We have 3 preferential subjects, and learning from experiences, future functionalities and applications, and towards sustainability. These 3 main preferential subject headings have stayed the same for the last, as much as I know, 10 years, but it's the dot points in underneath that continue to change session by session as the world networks are changing. What are the customers asking for? How can we address that? So that's what we find with our 3 preferential subjects. The publications released recently, there's been a green book, there's been a newsletter, and there's been 4 technical brochures. And as someone said, the technical brochures are not a 20-page document. Some of these are 300 and 400-page documents covering in depth these subjects. Maintenance, afterlaying tests. Here we are, 100 years on, and we're still talking about afterlaying tests. How can we make sure that the cable that's in the ground is actually what we need and is going to last the distance? Publications planned for this year. There's a lot of active working groups happening, and you can see by the different subject matters. B154 looked at cable systems during large disturbances, earthquakes. How does a cable exist when the earthquake or the earth moves by a metre? The Japanese have come up with some fantastic ideas because they suffer from it a whole lot. Here in Australia, we have no idea because we don't suffer from this. But New Zealand has been able to assist. However, we've stepped up with bushfires because we know a little bit about those. Green books are CIGRE's state-of-the-art flagship reference material. We have accessories for HV and EHV extruded cables. Volume 2, Volume 1 last year, I think, or the year before, got translated into the Chinese language. Volume 2 is with the publishers at the moment. A proposal for a book on cable ratings. I just wanted to talk briefly about cable ratings. 6 years ago, as the study committee, we looked at creating a working group to look at cable ratings because people felt that the IEC standards didn't cover all the possibilities that they needed to. After 3 years of that working group, the working group was so excited that they had accomplished quite a lot that they asked the study committee whether they could continue. The study committee created a new working group, and they are 2 years into their 3-year thing of looking at different cable setups, installations, and how they affect each other and how best to get the cable ratings. The outcome of these working groups will form the foundation of a rewriting of the IEC standards. Now that is exciting stuff, because this is stuff that is looked at daily by multiple people around the world, and CIGRE is part of the foundation of it. And I just enjoy that bit. Okay, so this year in 22 in Paris, we looked at creating 5 new working groups and 2 task forces with these topics. I won't go through them all, you can read them. But there's a joint working group being run by B2, the transition between underground and overhead and how best to do that. So I haven't got a number there because it's a B2 number, but as you can see, we've got numbers up into the 90s now. So there's a lot of activity happening in the B1 space. We couldn't meet face to face, so we kicked off webinars, and these are some of the ones over the last little while. And you can see the numbers are continually to rise. 492 attendees on these webinars. There's a lot of interest in what's happening in the cable space. The Asia-Oceania Regional Committee, we are major members of the AORC. And this is where countries that can't normally make it to the Paris session, CIGRE comes to them. We try and disseminate information. It's a two-way street. What's happening in your country? How can CIGRE help? Let us take that back maybe for subjects to study, things like that. So Australia is a major player in the AORC. Okay, so what's happening in the Australian panel? We continue to grow. We've currently got 39 members, and dealing with engineers, it's sometimes like herding cats. And we've got a great panel. We really have. We've got very enthusiastic people that are part of this. Australian panel has representatives from both Australia and New Zealand. New Zealand has one transmission company, and therefore for them to be able to speak to like-minded people, they've joined Australia so that there's other transmission companies that they can bounce ideas off, and it gives them a link straight into the study committee as well. End-to-end, we've spoken a little bit about. Considerable activity in the cable space, medium voltage, everything's underground in new estates now. So what does that mean? Have we just got anybody rolling it out, or have we got standards and control over that? MV, HV and EHV connections as we start to get into renewables. We've got wind farms coming in at 22 kV, 66 kV, 220 kV. So there's multiple voltages bringing this stuff in, and the conductor sizes continue to rise. And the extended involvement from the next generation, I think, is really exciting. As us older people start to step to the background, it's terrific to see the NGN people coming up. So we've been trying to excite some enthusiasm there. Some of the topics of interest, I won't go through them all, but you can see them on the recording here. Maintenance of the existing assets, how best to test it, what do we make of the test results, continued growth of fibre optic cables in measuring and monitoring systems, offshore wind farms. Who would have thought that Australia would have an offshore wind farm? With all of our land mass, why would we need offshore? But here they come. Okay, so submarine cables, DC links, long AC, large conductors, 2,500 square mil, 66 kV. So you've got a tiny little bit of insulation around a very big conductor. These are the working groups that the Australian members are part of. This is my last slide. So I just wanted to shout out to the people from the Australian panel that have got themselves involved in the working groups. This puts Australia on the international radar, and I think that's exciting. It also brings this technology into Australia. There's a lot of people involved in cable work these days that really don't know a lot about cables. And they're making decisions about a technology that they really don't understand. So the use of the B1 panel is just growing and growing. People are more and more interested in what does a cable actually look like, what does it mean, how do I design it, how do I install it, how do I test it, how do I maintain it. So good for these ladies and gentlemen that have got themselves involved, and we have our Australian panel meeting next week here in Sydney. Thank you.